Okay, so we learn how to factor. We learn how to solve by factoring. We learn how to solve by quadratic formula. We also learn how to solve completing the square. We're gonna use any of those three. Okay, when I say any, it's your choice, whichever one you guys want. Factoring sometimes is not possible. Sometimes it is, sometimes it is not possible. And we also learn synthetic formula. Okay, so here I'm gonna find all the roots. One root has been given. Okay, so basically which number can I divide this and gives me a remainder of 0? Because my highest exponent is a 3. You guys see my highest exponent is a 3. My answer will have 3 roots. If my highest exponent was a 10, well, my answer will have 10 roots. I'm not gonna go that crazy, but I expect 3 roots. One of them is given. One of them is -2. Okay, what do I mean with that? I remember synthetic formula. So I'm gonna say my root is a -2. And I'm just gonna use the coefficients, right? The numbers in front of the letters. Make sure you're not skipping any. So I see my exponents, I see x to the third, x to the second, x to the 1, and x to the 0. So I'm not skipping anything. I'm just writing the numbers in front of it. So 1, 1, -14, and -24. I'm going to use synthetic division, and then this at the end will have to be a 0 if it is a root. Here it says it is. We're gonna see. Okay. Once again, I'm not skipping any exponents. If you guys are in your homework, you will be skipping some. If you're skipping some, add a 0. So what I mean, for example, I didn't have an x squared. Let's say it was something like this. It was x to the third minus 14x. So for the squared, I will put a 0. Like I said, if I was skipping it. In my case, I'm not, so I'm just going to leave it there. Okay. So what I'm going to do, let me bring this number down. So it's a 1. And this number, this 1 at the bottom, I'm going to multiply by my root. Remember, my root is -2. So 1 times -2 is -2. Right, these numbers at the very bottom, I will always multiply times -2. Now I'm going to add these numbers. 1 minus 2 is a -1. Multiply by the root. So multiply by -2. So it gives me +2. Right, negative times negative is positive. Add those two numbers. -14 plus 2, right? I'm adding. That gives me -12. Different signs you subtract. -12 times the root. So -12 times -2 is +24. And you see how -24 plus 24 is 0. So that's what I meant. It was a root. It gave us no remainder. Okay, so that's a root. I have 1. I have to find the other 2. Now, this function, this equation, is going to break down to x squared. So 1x squared. Notice how here it was x to the third. I went down 1 exponent, so x to the second, minus 1x minus 12. Okay, so this is what I have now. Remember how we learned how to solve by factoring? So this is going to equal to 0. And I need to find which values of x make this equal to 0. I'm going to do factoring. I'm thinking two numbers that when I multiply it is equal to -12. You guys see where I got the -12 for. But when I add my numbers is a -1. That's the term in the center. Okay, so I'm gonna think, how about -4 and +3? When I add them is -1. When I multiply them is -12. So this thing factors to x minus 4, x plus 3 is equal to 0. Now I have to think, which value of x make each parenthesis equal to 0? So look at the first parenthesis, x minus 4. What value of x will make that equal to 0? Well, then I'm going to say, well, x equals 4, right? Now look at the second parenthesis. What value of x will make that equal to 0? Well, x equals -3. So those are my roots. The first one was given, -2. The second one is 4. And the last one is a -3. That's it. Now, some of you, well, you will be wondering, how am I going to type this on my homework? The -2, I'm already going to write it down. It's going to be there. You're going to see it. It's already there. I'm going to leave a space for the 4, and I'm going to leave a space for -3. So you type those in. I'm going to type in the first one, but you type in the others. Okay, so we solved it by by factoring. Let's take a look at here. Okay, so I have that equation, and then I have the root is -3. So this is my root, and then let me write my coefficient. So 1, +7, +25, +39. Again, in my case, I'm not skipping any, but if you are, put a 0. And I know my remainder is 0 because I said it is a root. Okay, so that way we do this again. Let's bring this 1 down, multiply it by the root. So 1 times a -3, and then combine those. 7 minus 3 is 4. 4 times the root, so it gives me -12, right? 4 times -3. Now 25 minus 12 is 13. 13 times the root is -39. 39 minus 39 is 0, so good. Now this gives me 1x squared plus 4x plus 13. Okay, and this is equal to 0. Now, factoring, you can always try factoring if you wish. Now, I'm going to say factoring doesn't always work, all right? Think, of two numbers that when you multiply it equals 13, but when you add them is equal to 4. In this case, we cannot think of such numbers. So factoring doesn't always work. It works a lot, but not always. So in this case, let me use the quadratic formula. Remember the quadratic formula, I called it a bad boy went to a so-called, as a matter of fact, let me write this in blue, a radical party, because the boy was being square, he lost a chance with 4 awesome chicks. And then everything was over at 2 a.m. I put the square root inside with a different color, because remember we called that the discriminant. And then I said the discriminant is the hard part, so work the discriminant first. I'm going to say my A is 1, my B is 4, and my C is 13. So I can work the discriminant. The discriminant is B squared minus 4 times A times C. So I have 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 13. I know 4 squared is 16 minus, let me combine my whole multiplication together. So 4 times 1 times 13 is 52. And I know 16 minus 52 is a -36. All right, my discriminant is negative, so I'm gonna get 2 imaginary solutions. Okay, I have to do the square root of a -36. I remembered this breaks down as the square root of -1 times the square root of 36. The square root of -1 is I, right? We talked about that before. The square root of 36 is positive or -6. Now we tend to write the I after the 6. So I'm going to say this is positive or -6I. Okay, I'm not quite done yet. From our quadratic formula, I was doing the blue part. I did the square root of b squared minus 4ac. That's all I did. Okay, now let me use my whole formula. So negative b, since my b is 4, so let me write this as -4 plus or minus 6i all over 2 times a, so 2. Since my a is 1, so 2 times 1. Okay, so this is going to give me my two other answers, right? -4 plus or minus 6i over 2. Look at your whole numbers. I feel we can divide them all by 2. Okay, so this is going to become -2 plus or minus 3i over 1. Notice I divided each number by 2, right? I simplified. Now, anything over a fraction, over 1 is not a fraction anymore. So my other two solutions are -2 plus or minus 3i. All right, so that means one of them is -2 plus 3i, and the other one is -2 minus 3i. So my three solutions, -3 was given, right? That was my first root. That was given. My other root is going to be -2 plus 3i, and then -2 minus 3i. The first one will be given, so I'm only asking for the other two. Okay, so we review. We can solve it by factoring. We can solve it by quadratic formula. We can also I'm going to do this one by completing the square. So I already have a root. One of my roots, the one root given is a -5. And I'm going to write 1 minus 25 minus 25. I just wrote the numbers in front of it. And it says that when I do my synthetic, my remainder is going to be 0. So let's see. I'm going to bring this 1 down. 1 times the root, so 1 times -5. Combine those, 1 minus 5 is a -4. -4 times -5 is +20. Combine those, -25 plus 20 is a -5. And then -5 times the root, -5 times -5 is +25. And -25 plus 25 is 0. So good, yeah, my remainder was 0. So that means that this went down to x squared minus 4x minus 5. And this is equal to 0. Again, we could do factoring if it works. We could do quadratic formula, but I also showed you guys how to do this by completing the square. So let me review that. Okay, by completing the squared, I want the letters on the left side. So x squared minus 4x, I'm going to leave a space. That -5, I'm going to move it to the other side as a +5. Right, 0 plus 5 is 5, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And then my leading coefficient, so the number at the very front should be a 1, which is good. Then I see my second term, and I see the half of -4, it's a -2. I'm going to use the -2. Now, -2 squared is 4. So to complete the square, let me add 4 to each side. Because on the left side, if I was to factor that, that gives me x minus 2 squared. Right? That's what we call it, completing the square. On the other side, 5 plus 4 is 9. To get rid of the exponent, I'm going to use square roots. So I'm going to say x minus 2, right? Without the exponent, just x minus 2, it's equal to plus or minus 3. All right, that's the square root of 9. Technically, I did the square roots. So I'm going to say x is going to be equal to +2 plus or minus 3. Notice all I did, the -2, I brought it over. That's a +2. So +2, plus or minus 3. So that means that x is equal to 5 or -1. Right? 2 plus 3, 2 minus 3. All right, so that means my roots are going to be -5, which is the one that was given, +5, and -1. Again, -5 was given, and I had to find 5 and -1. Okay, so remember, 21, we solved it by factoring. We could have done this by factoring as well. Number 22, we did it by quadratic formula. And number 23, I solved it by completing the square. Which one of the three methods you use, it doesn't matter. All right, let's take a look at number 24. All right, so it says that a root is 2. The root given is 2. So I'm going to say that my leading coefficients are 1, minus 10, positive 33, negative 34. And when I do my synthetic division, my remainder is going to be 0. That's what it says. Once you call it a root, that's what you say. Again, make sure you're not skipping any numbers there. So bring this 1 down. Times 2, right? I'm going to multiply by the root. So 1 times 2 is 2. Combine these numbers. Negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8. Times 2 is a negative 16. Now 33 minus 16 is 17. Times 2 is 34. Negative 34, positive 34 is 0. Okay, so yeah, it is a root. So now that I have this simplified to x squared minus 8x plus 17 is equal to 0. Now I can solve this by factoring. I can solve this by completing the square, and I can solve this by quadratic formula. Let me use quadratic formula. My A is 1, my B is a negative 8, and my C is 17. Now remember, the bad boy went to a so-called radical party. The boy was being squared, so he lost a chance with 4 awesome chicks. Everything was over at 2 a.m. Let me worry about my discriminant first. So I'm just looking at B squared minus 4 times A times C. So negative 8, all of it squared, minus 4 times 1 times 17. Now negative 8 squared, negative 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times 1 times 17, that's 68. 64 minus 68 is a negative 4. My discriminant is a negative. Now let me find the square root of negative 4. That's basically the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 4. So plus or minus I2, which we call plus or minus 2i. Remember, we write the number first. Okay, I did the hard part. Now let me use my quadratic formula. Negative b, since my b is negative already, negative of a negative is going to become positive 8. Plus or minus, right? The negative of a negative, that's why it came out positive 8. Okay, plus or minus 2i, right? I just worked this not too long ago. Now at the bottom, 2 times a, so 2, right? Because a is 1. I see my numbers. This can be simplified to 4 plus or minus 1i over 1. I divided my numbers, all of them I divided by 2. Once we have a 1 underneath a fraction, it's not a fraction anymore. So I'm going to say my two solutions are going to be 4 plus or minus I. All right, so 4 plus I, 4 minus I. So let's see. 2 was given. That's the root that was given to begin with. Another one of my solutions is going to be 4 plus I. And the last one's going to be 4 minus I. Those are the two that I just solved. 2 was given. Okay. Not bad. Let me zoom out. Which method do you use? Factoring, quadratic formula, or completing the square? It's really up to you.